We have a horrific, sad, and honestly chilling story to dive into for today's video, no pun intended, as a woman has filed a lawsuit within the past week against a major cruise line, claiming that when her husband passed away on board, instead of his body being properly and respectfully stored inside of a morgue on board, he was placed on a pallet inside of a drink cooler, which didn't have the proper temperature to store his body, and the body unfortunately decomposed, so much so that they could not have an open casket burial like they had planned to. Of course, I am going to go over the details revolving around this shocking, unbelievable story, as well as give my opinion on the matter later on in the video, not only from the perspective of a guest that just recently sailed with this cruise line not even a week ago, but also a former crew member that's worked for multiple lines and understands the inner workings on board a cruise ship in places like the morgue, as I have seen it, and I understand maybe a little bit more details when it comes to morgues on board cruise ships than, let's say, your average guest. However, I do want to start this off by giving my sincere condolences to not only the wife of the man that passed away. You have Robert Jones and his wife Marilyn Jones. I also want to give condolences to his friends, family, and loved ones as well. And one more thing, I do want to also point out that this story, because I don't want you guys to shoot the messenger, has been put out by literally every single major media outlet out there. Business Insider, Fox, even all the way down to TMZ. So this entire situation started just under a year ago, back on August 15th, 2022. Robert Jones and Marilyn Jones were taking a 7-day cruise on board the Celebrity Equinox out of Fort Lauderdale over to the Caribbean, when unfortunately Robert Jones, Marilyn Jones' husband, suffered a heart attack and did not survive the heart attack. Once he passed, the officers and authorities on board, the crew members, gave Marilyn Jones two options as far as what to do with her husband's body with dignity and respect at that point in time. She could either take the body off over in the port of call of San Juan, Puerto Rico, in which the body would have to be flown back over to the mainland in the United States, and she would have to unfortunately fit the bill for it. Marilyn Jones was told, however, that if she chose this option to disembark her husband's body over in San Juan, Puerto Rico, there was the very real possibility that an autopsy would have to be performed over in San Juan before the body was taken back over to the mainland, delaying the process of her and the body of her husband getting back over to wherever it was that they were going to do their funeral and burial services. So the second option for her was to have the body stored respectfully inside of a morgue on board the Celebrity Equinox. However, that didn't happen. She did choose the second option because, unbeknownst to her, according to Celebrity, the morgue was not operational at the time. So instead of being stored in the morgue, the body was then stored on a pallet inside of a drink cooler, a walk-in freezer, where the temperatures were not ideal enough to properly store the body, where the body would then decompose, it would start to bloat, it would turn green. And during the 6 days that Robert Jones's body was inside of that walk-in cooler, as it decomposed, once they arrived back over to Fort Lauderdale, both a coroner and a police officer would walk into the freezer to only find this man's decomposed body laying on the floor on the pallet. Marilyn Jones and her family had a long-standing tradition that whenever a death occurred within the family, they would always have an open casket funeral so that everybody can view the body as they did the funeral arrangements. However, this was no longer possible due to the alleged negligence of Celebrity Cruises on board the Celebrity Equinox. A year later, on April 19th, this past Wednesday to be exact, Marilyn, her two children, and her grandchildren have now filed a $1 million lawsuit against Celebrity Cruises for the negligence that took place on board with her husband, Robert Jones. Now, I know that was a lot to take in, but we're going to keep going. Now, at the time of the unfortunate passing of Robert Jones, he was 78 years old. So yes, obviously he was up there. On board a cruise ship, if you sailed before, depending on the cruise line, you might find, yes, a good mix as far as the age demographic. However, the average cruiser is 45 years old, and well, you're going to find some older people on board that are elderly or retired, and it's not outside of the realm of possibility that something could potentially happen on board a cruise ship. It's not common, it's not uncommon. However, somebody that worked on board cruise ships, it's not something that we get surprised at if we hear that somebody that was elderly had a heart attack, or even somebody of like a regular age either falling on board and breaking their ankle. My point is that even if you're on a cruise ship, we are still not escaping reality, meaning things could happen. And legally, it is required for every single cruise line, at least modern cruise ships, to have a morgue on board. They will also typically have a medical center on board. And yes, in case you were curious, they typically do have some kind of brig or holding facility or jail on board. Now, just getting back to the situation with Robert Jones, I do believe, like I said, this is sad and tragic, and my condolences do go out to his wife, Marilyn Jones, as well as his family, because something like this, if it is proven to be true, well, this is just straight up negligence on the side of Celebrity Cruises. This should not have happened because naturally, when you hear about something like this, like I said, it's extremely unbelievable, but you gotta wonder, how does something like this even happen in the first place? Marilyn Jones, I think we all can agree, should have been told that the morgue was not operating at that point in time. I've been on cruise ships many a time where I've seen people pass away on board. Well, I haven't physically seen it, obviously, but it's been announced or it has been confirmed through my friends of mine that are crew members as well, and typically you'll see things like the body actually getting dropped off in the next port of call or island, or the situation where the ship has turned around. I was recently on board a Virgin ship where we had somebody unfortunately pass away, and we turned around immediately in order for an autopsy to be done, investigation, all that jazz before we end up sailing back out. Many believe that Marilyn was indeed persuaded more so to side with the idea of just preserving her husband inside of the morgue on board the cruise ship rather than taking them off in San Juan, Puerto Rico, for a myriad of reasons. One, cruise ships don't like to deal with media. Whenever something happens, and I'm not saying this is no disrespect to Celebrity Cruises at all, it's understandable to a certain degree. When something like that happens, like a death on board and a body have to be removed, it's going to get major media attention, as you guys can see. Well, this story has definitely taken a tone up, as you guys know, with this whole thing. But you don't want that kind of press. So they said, you know what, maybe we can persuade her to do this quietly and wait until they get back over to Fort Lauderdale in 6 days, and that way it can be done that way. Or maybe they just wanted to save her the headache of having to deal with an autopsy over in San Juan, as well as the cost to get the body back over to the mainland, wherever it is that she is from, because there is the potential that maybe she did not have insurance, and should something like that happen, to fit a bill to take a human body all the way back from, let's say, San Juan, Puerto Rico, over to who knows where she's from, could be Seattle or New York, it's probably going to cost a pretty penny, and it's not a road that anybody really wants to go down or may not even have the finances to do. There are just so many angles that all of this can be looked at. It is sad, nevertheless. However, as a crew member, well, even just as a human, I would think that when it comes to the crew on board that decided to store Robert Jones's body on a pallet inside of a drink cooler, would know better and would handle all of this with more dignity if this is actually true. Because remember, at this point in time, all of this is alleged. When it comes to the $1 million lawsuit, I've been looking at the comments because this has been going on for a couple days now. I was going to do a video on it earlier. However, I just didn't want to disembark a celebrity ship and praise it so highly because I did love the ship, and then after that talk about this story. I'm sure you guys understand, but just looking at this, I would say when it comes to the $1 million lawsuit, a lot of people are saying that she won't get it. A lot of people are saying she deserves more. Personally, for me, if it was one of my family members, one of my loved ones, I'd be going for the whole bag. And it's not just about the money. I'm assuming that there were costs. I'm not sure if Robert Jones had any type of life insurance or the burial arrangements were covered under either his wife or anything of that nature. But either way, for the family, for his children and for his grandchildren, this was all done in a very undignified way without integrity. So yes, financially, I do believe that celebrities should go ahead, if they do take this to court, settle and pay them whatever it is that they're asking for. If it's 1 million, sure. If it's 3 million, sure. Because something like this, well, as you guys can see, it's not just me talking about this. I believe Tony talked about it from La Lita Loca, and then a lot of other mainstream media outlets left and right are talking about this particular topic because it is a big deal that has blown up, and understandably so. Also, I hate to point out the obvious in this whole situation. I don't believe this story has a reflection of Celebrity Cruises as a whole. I've only sailed with Celebrity once. However, I do believe that they are a very professional and amazing cruise line. And it looks like somebody somewhere made a mistake. And yes, maybe they should be held accountable and Celebrity should pay up. However, for people, I've seen people out there saying they're never going to cruise Celebrity again. There are people that are saying they're never going to jump on a cruise ship again. This is not a reflection of Celebrity cruising as a whole. It's not a reflection of cruising as a whole. Things happen whether we are on land or at sea, and I try to make this as obvious as possible in every single one of my videos. But I'm not gonna sound like a broken record and keep repeating myself on everything that's happened. We all know the gist of all of it. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think of this horrific story? Let me know, guys. As usual, of course, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and well, I'll see you later. Take it easy.